Good morning. In my studio this morning is Mr. David Barrett, the leader of the NDP and the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition in the legislature of Victoria. It is said, conventional current political wisdom, that Mr. Barrett is sitting quietly in the wings, waiting for social credit, which certainly has had and still has many major troubles of image and fact, waiting for social credit to self-destruct. And that in political circles, things are so bad, and business circles, things are so bad for Mr. Bennett now, that all Mr. Barrett has to do is to keep his cool. He will, of course, I'm sure, remind the electorate in due course, perhaps even next spring, he might tell us, of the handling of the Eckhart Royal Commission, of the dirty tricks, of the constitutional kerfuffle, and his very different position from that of Mr. Bennett. But my first questions to Mr. Barrett this morning will be directly aimed at B.C.R.I.C, on which on this program the other day you saw Mr. Bennett deny paternity and say that he was merely the doctor who delivered the baby, B.C.R.I.C, which is now properly in totally private hands. Mr. Barrett, on B.C.R.I.C and other issues, and your involvement too, after the break. Premier Bennett seems still to be extraordinarily proud, albeit evasive, on the B.C.R.I.C deal, tendering at $55 a share on the Kaiser resources. Mr. Barrett has been outspoken in some areas of this, but Mr. Barrett, I would like you to look at this B.C.R.I.C affair now and give me, if you can, a considered opinion of what should be done or what you would do in similar circumstances.
Well, first of all, I don't think I'd find myself in similar circumstances, but the only decent thing to do in terms of keeping some business respect in this province and some image of decency and sensibility is to stop this deal from going through. And the one person who is responsible to stop this deal from going through is Bill Bennett, who touted this deal, who fathered this whole arrangement with B.C.R.I.C, and who told ordinary people who had never been through the stock market before to go out and borrow money, in effect, and buy shares. And these are the people who are getting burned, and the only protection they have is for him to come up front right now and stop this very bad deal.
This is a complex matter, Mr. Barrett.
Yes, it is.
Even I, said he immodestly, find it hard to put all the bits and pieces together. Please, for the benefit of people in British Columbia, tell me why the B.C.R.I.C offer to purchase Kaiser is a bad deal.
First of all, the asset that is being purchased is a good asset. Let us understand that the operating coal mines are a good buy. However, private capital is already in place. There is no need for new venture capital, i.e. the money collected for B.C.R.I.C, to be placed to buy out a functioning operation. It should be providing new jobs. Secondly, the viability of the operation has been gutted with the diamonds being taken out of the coal mine, so to speak. Ashland was sold off a year ago.
Ashland was Ashland Oil, sold off by Kaiser prior to making this deal with B.C.R.I.C.
I don't know, and there's no evidence that he knew in advance that Ashland, the impending deal with B.C.R.I.C was taking place. But we know that Ashland, its major asset, was sold off for $700 million a year ago, making Kaiser a profit of about $250 million. When the first deal was announced at $44 between B.C.R.I.C and Kaiser, in that deal were two other major assets, Kaiser Oil US and the properties held by Kaiser in the North Sea area. The day the second offer was made, Kaiser sold off the North Sea oil assets for $40 million, picking up that diamond. There's now two options in the deal to buy back planes and Lord knows what else worth of property for $15 million, plus another diamond, Kaiser Oil, which he gets to buy back not at its appraised value of today, but at the book value of what he invested. In other words, he's taking out all the cream out of the company, protecting himself, and then making $1 million a month for pulling off this deal, and we are left with the bare bones, that's all.
The coal assets.
The coal assets.
Don't even get the corporate jets.
No, we
or
don't.
the one on order.
No.
Or the properties in Mexico.
No, and he got those coal assets originally for $50 million by borrowing, and he bought that by borrowing $35 million from Canadian banks to make the original deal.
That was as an entrepreneur. Let me try and keep it even simpler than that. The BRIC directors, 6 of them,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
decided that they were interested, through Mr. Hellawell's guidance, presumably, in buying Kaiser as an operating company.
That's
correct?
my understanding, yes.
Okay. At that time, the shares were around $28 to $30 of Kaiser on the market.
That's correct.
Right. There was a flurry of interest at the time, and Mr. Hellawell later made an option to pick up 25% of Kaiser's shares at $44.
That is correct.
Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
He backed off that.
That is correct.
He then made this tender at $55 for 51% of the company.
That is correct.
So therefore, BRIC had to raise, and will have to raise, these hundreds of millions of dollars to buy BRIC at $55 a share, correct?
That's correct.
What happened to the BRIC stock in the meantime, when Kaiser jumped over the period from 28 to 44 to 55? What happened to the BRIC shares?
It is held fairly steady. I understand yesterday it was down to 630. It was as high as 680. It fluctuated that 50 cents. But one point that I want to make is that the $44 per share offer was accepted. But the purchaser then decided that he wasn't offering the seller enough and went back and said, oh no, I offered you $44 a
For
share.
25%.
For 25%. I'd like you to reconsider. Please take 55.
For 51%.
That's correct. And after Kaiser had written in, apparently, those 2 options to pull out Kaiser Oil and also to pull out all of the other assets, which we don't know the total value of, including the plane that you mentioned.
We may come back to some basics, but one thing I want to get clear right now. If the offer is taken up as stands,
Yes.
BRIC will own 51% or so of the shares of Kaiser.
That is correct, yes.
Right. Meanwhile, the Japanese must approve this deal. Mitsubishi and the consortium own
40%.
40%.
That's right.
Must they approve the deal before anything really goes through?
It appears that they have by permitting Kaiser to tender his shares, yes.
What if the Japanese, who are not stupid businessmen, say, okay, if BRIC is buying out Kaiser at $55 a share, and we own
40%.
40%, why shouldn't the Japanese say, okay, buy us out too?
Well, why wouldn't they? They bought their shares at $3.80 some 7 years ago.
And they're now guaranteed.
They're now guaranteed $55 a share. The only reason they bought the shares at that time was to ensure themselves a constant supply of coal. They now have that by contract. The original purpose for Mitsubishi to buy and to keep Kaiser viable at that time has now disappeared. The smart Japanese decision, obviously, would be to accept the offer of $55 a share, walk off with a profit, force BRIC to go and borrow another $400 million, and move BRIC from a position of having $350 million or $400 million in the bank to a position of being $600 million in debt out of this deal.
You're telling me this deal could cost BRIC a total of $1 billion?
Yes, close to $1 billion. That is correct.
What? We're not supposed to talk about speculation on shares, but this is a matter of public interest. If the Japanese tender, or say, buy us out at $55, neither of us is a stock analyst, I don't suppose, but it wouldn't be difficult to predict what would happen to BRIC stock, would it?
Well, if you're buying an asset that is making less money than when it cost you to service the debt on, then your shares are not going to be worth very much as a competitive measure of the marketplace.
Even on the $600 million investment at the moment, will, if the Kaiser operation goes smoothly, no labor troubles, no big railway disasters or whatnot, will BRIC be able to make money on the $600 million deal?
Not enough, in my opinion, to pay dividends on the Kaiser deal alone, but the original assets will still carry BRIC. Those companies that were bought under the NDP administration were good when we bought them and are still good now. They can carry BRIC into a bit of a marginal profit position. If, however, the Japanese tender, there is no way that BRIC can be in a profit position to pay dividends for a long, long time.
I'll ask you, I'll put this question to you again. Is this deal so palpably against the public interest and the interest of BRIC shareholders, of whom there are millions of little British Columbians with 5 shares apiece, hundreds of thousands, that Bennett should act?
He has no option. He cannot allow us to be skinned this way. Edgar Kaiser is running him like a puppet on a string. I cannot believe that reasonable people read that letter of agreement and came to the decision that it was a good deal. I cannot understand.
Have you taken expert, I'm not being snipey or snarky, but have you taken expert business advice?
Yes.
And not merely going on your basic gut
Jack Webster,
left-wing view of business?
First of all, let us understand that those assets that made the company viable were made on decisions made by our government. I went to the same experts who advised us on those purchases, which were all money makers, not losers like Bill Bennett says, all money makers. I went back to the lawyers concerned and the chartered accountants concerned, and I said, what is your view of this deal? And they said, it is a disastrous sellout.
Bill Bennett sat here the other day and said, it's a private company, I've got nothing to do with it, I'm totally divorced from it, what's that effect? I'm not the father, I was just the doctor who delivered it, it is entirely in the hands of the shareholders. His position is total hands-off. He does not and would not accept any of the implications from the business community who criticize it or from you.
Well, first of all, Bill Bennett is not telling the truth, and I hate to be so vicious and blunt, but he's not telling the truth. He has everything to do with this company. It was exempted from special sections of the Companies Act. A special bill was brought in the House. It was touted through BC government news. You and I and the taxpayers of this province paid $40 million to sell the concept of BRIC.
You mean commissions?
Commissions. It has been a government child, social credit child, from the moment of conception. There was no abortion. The baby was born. It delivered an election victory. And now when it's got messy diapers, Daddy walks away and says it's got nothing to do with me. Now look, Jack, he interfered in the private sector when the CPR wanted to buy Macmillan Bloedel. He came out of the hills as a masked man in a ski jacket and said, you stop that, Big Julie. Now, if he can interfere in the private sector and then walk away and say he never interferes in the private sector when it's public money involved, then, Jack, he is running for cover on the worst deal, the worst sellout ever in the history of British Columbia, and I can't put it any stronger than that.
Dave Barrett and Webster after the break. Mr. Barrett, are you convinced this is your winning election victory? Winning election issue?
Jack, if it was an election issue, he certainly should be defeated on it. He doesn't have to call an election for 3 years. He can sit tight over there and hope that this blows over. Jack, what is worse about this, never mind the politics, I'll take my chances out there in the political field. What is worse is that a golden opportunity dreamt about by W.A.C. Bennett, put in practice by us to have a say in our economy, has been thrown away. The purpose of buying those original assets was to guarantee that that money and those jobs and redevelopment took place here in BC. When he sold those assets through BRIC, he told every one of us that this was a means of getting people to reinvest in new ventures in British Columbia.
Excuse me if I have a laugh. He said at the time it would teach people how to invest in the stock market. It certainly taught Kaiser how to invest in the stock market.
Edgar Kaiser Jr. does not need any lessons. Edgar Kaiser Jr. has come in, scooped up everything off the table, stuffed it in his pockets, and then asked for a commission for stuffing it, and is going to bail out Kaiser U.S. Steel in California with good Canadian money. And there are people out there, Jack, who saw the premier of this province on television, went out and borrowed money at 12, 14, and 15% and bought BRIC shares and are waiting for their big payoff while Kaiser makes off with the booty.
BRIC at $6 and something, Kaiser jumps from 28.30 to 55.
Not bad.
Now, let's get down to some specific nitty-gritty. Does Mr. Edgar Kaiser become a director of BRIC when this tender is taken up, if there's no government interference on the 7th, prior to the 7th of October?
Yes, he becomes a director, and also he reaps a 3.5% profit off of all sales of what was left of Kaiser coal to the Japanese.
Now let me get that clear.
Yeah.
Edgar Kaiser becomes a director of BRIC.
That's correct.
Edgar Kaiser, under the terms of the document, does he maintain and operate his sales company?
That is correct.
How much does he get for maintaining and operating his sales company?
3.5% of the total sales volume, which works out close to $1 million a month. I made the remark a week ago that he wins the lottery, a $1 million lottery every month without having to lift a finger.
As a director of the company, does Edgar Kaiser therefore collect between $12 and $13 million a year commission for his sales organization with its corporate jet?
With his sales...
On sales already made?
That is correct. On sales that are already made, he's getting commissions, and he's carrying that over with him into being a director on BRIC as well.
Is that ethical? Have you had any legal advice on that?
No, it is not ethical. It is not ethical. It is not ethical. It is not reasonable. When you sell your assets, you have no moral right to claim a commission off assets, part of which is contracts for the sale of coal.
But he will be the sales agent for Kaiser through his marketing organization as a director of Kaiser.
Jack, there is nothing ethical about that. There is nothing moral about that. That's just big business.
These sales have already been made and signed
That
for.
is correct, and he is going to get his pound of flesh off the deal on top of having sold off the asset.
For how many years will he collect his commission?
I'm not sure of that.
It's 4.
Well, okay, I'm not sure that it was that long even.
And BRIC has an option to continue this arrangement for a further 3 if they so wish.
Well, the only person who could have written all of that in the contract was Kaiser himself.
Oh, come now, Mr. Helliwell is an experienced accountant and businessman, and he was ably supported by 6 directors by the name of Jack Poole, Pitts, Pilley, Morris Young, Chunky Woodward, and Helliwell himself. 6 directors.
I have not seen any evidence that serious thought with a good business background has gone into this deal.
Was there a real conflict of interest or not when Mr. Poole, who stands to make $1 million or so, did not vote? Was that not proper for Mr. Poole to sit back and say, no, I won't vote on the Kaiser takeover offer?
Of course, it was perfectly legal. It was his responsibility not to vote. But that...
Should any of those directors of BRIC have held any shares in the stock market at all?
Well, I do not believe that purchases made after the negotiations were entered into with Kaiser would be above suspicion in the public mind. Perhaps there's nothing to be suspicious of, but there are people out there who would begin to wonder that once negotiations began between Kaiser and BRIC, and then certain company directors bought Kaiser shares after that, or options after that, one would be suspicious. Don't quote me. Read what Mr. Hepburn of Odlum Reed said, and he is certainly one of the foremost statesmen in the securities industry, and he said it would be beyond belief that somebody didn't know something was going on.
At that meeting, oh, by the way, Kaiser today is at less than $53.
Yes.
While the takeover offer is at $55. Does that indicate anything to you?
That indicates there's some nervous smart money wondering whether or not Bennett will step in at the last minute. But it's still hanging tough at 53. They're willing to gamble on a margin of about $2 that Bennett won't step in. Every day we get closer to the date of closing of October the 7th, it is my opinion that the Kaiser shares will gradually creep up. As long as Bill Bennett's upcountry throwing snowballs out of helicopters, they're safer to see that stock creep up. It is a comic opera.
But is it not a fact that everything done by the board of directors was on the face of it proper? There were a couple of them with conflict of interest, but they did not vote on the takeover.
That is correct. Perfectly legal.
But not proper.
Well, I don't think it's proper, and the excuse given by Mr. Helliwell in terms of his wife's shares is that that's her business and he doesn't talk to her. I've been married to Shirley for 28 years, and between her and I during my student days and right up to the point we are now, she knows how much money I've got, and I know how much money she's got. Our marriage is a partnership. And if she's holding out on me and I come home and find out about it, I would have to explain to her how I was holding out. So let's not kid ourselves, Jack. Husbands and wives do talk to each other.
Oh, to be clinically correct, though, once that Halliwell had knowledge in his own mind that a takeover bid was to be made, anything he had told his wife would have been inside information.
Jack.
Clinically correct.
Clinically correct. It does not look good.
Mr. Barrett, what should the board of directors and Mr. Halliwell now do if your criticisms are correct? What should be done by that board of directors, which you say, on the face of it, barely considered seriously or properly the takeover bid at $55 of the Kaiser coal?
Bill Bennett should call the board of directors into his office. He is the one single largest shareholder in this company on behalf of the rest of us people, and tell those board of directors that he is not happy with the deal, and call an immediate public inquiry into the deal and order the deal to be halted.
Would that not shatter business confidence in British Columbia throughout North America? Because
it would restore confidence in the sanity of doing business in British Columbia. There are more behind the palm laughters going on in the corporate world internationally over this deal and what Kaiser has pulled off than you can shake a stick at. We have become the boob-rube area of the stock market. They have sold a gold brick for the Brooklyn Bridge, and Kaiser's walking off making us look stupid.
Webster and Dave Barrett after the break. Mr. Barrett, apart from your obvious unhappiness about this Kaiser deal when the stock went from $30 to $55 in no time flat, is it not a political fact of life that your nose is out of joint? Because you purchased, in 73 or 74, the basic assets which were turned over to BRIC.
Yeah.
And this was your long-held dream to keep these things in the government sector. Is that not so? And then Bennett won the election, turned around and destroyed the little empire you were building.
In terms of a philosophical debate, what you say is absolutely true. I believe that we should not lose control as citizens of this province in some profit-making corporations. We're stuck with the debts of B.C. Rail. We're stuck with the debts of B.C. Hydro. We needed some assets that would return some money back from resource revenue, the people of British Columbia. When we bought Cancel, Plateau Mills, Kootenay Forest Products, and a share of West Coast Transmission, all of those were money makers to provide money for general revenue to pay for such programs as Mincome, Pharmacare, and other social services.
How much did you pay for these four assets, Cancel, Plateau Mills, Kootenay Forest Products?
A little over $40 million. When they were taken into BRIC, they were worth at a book value of around $375 million. BRIC sold shares well over $400 million. And they went within 4 years of our purchase for $40 million up to 10 times their value.
Yes, but in the meantime, Mr. Bennett had thrown in some other government assets.
Yes,
had he not? How
he
much?
threw in some gas and oil leases. We're not sure how much those are worth because they never went to the private sector for bidding. Had we done that, Jack, you could have heard the scream about socialism or government control from here to Timbuktu. He arbitrarily threw in government leases on oil and gas that should have gone to competitive bidding. This is Dave Barrett, the NDPer, speaking. Those gas and oil leases should have gone to competitive bidding and let the marketplace determine their value so the people of the province had a fair share equally on those.
Then when he issued the shares, 5 apiece plus so many, no more than $5,000 to a person, he held the remainder, you might say, in the government's name.
He became the only holder of shares in the company that could, as a bloc, order the company in terms of handling the directors and elections of directors, ordering a special meeting as a single person, or controlling the company as a single shareholder, simply because he required that no other holder be allowed to hold more than 1% of the company by law.
Now, is it a fact, therefore, that the only group that could get together an opposition slate for the next meeting of the BRIC directors would be the government itself if it chose not to to take unilateral action by order in council.
That is correct. Some citizens who have phoned my office, both in Vancouver East and Victoria, want to use their 5 free shares to go to a general meeting. I have had to gently remind them that everybody who got 5 free shares never got voting rights. If you hold 5 free shares, you do not have voting rights.
You must have 100 registered shares.
You had to buy $600 worth to get a vote. And you lost a vote or control of those companies by taking the 5 free shares. You had to buy a vote to have any impact on that company.
Let me get this quite clear, Mr. Barrett. You say the BRIC deal is a bad deal because the directors who could vote and did vote, they must have had a quorum, I think there were 3, to take over BRIC, did it did it not realizing, as you say, that they were handing to Kaiser a beautiful gold brick on his original $50 million, whatever it was, investment, borrowed from the Royal Bank, and that he walks away and his executives walk away with some incredibly generous stock options, which I believe if they took the profits would amount to some $9 million.
I am not blaming the directors for what I consider to be their naivety. Mr. Halliwell has confessed to being naive. The last place to be naive is in the shark-filled waters of the investment world. But he's confessed his naivety. I am suggesting that I don't think enough thought went into the consequences of this deal, and I find it difficult to believe that someone has carefully thought out what Kaiser is getting away with in this deal.
For either $600 million or $1 billion at $55 a share, it is a poor buy with no prospect of revenues, dividends, or whatever for many years for BRIC. Is that correct?
That is correct, but what is the purpose of the buy? The original purpose of us acquiring the assets, the stated purpose of Bill Bennett changing the form of control of the assets, was to have new money to reinvest and create new jobs in new resource areas in British Columbia.
Have any new jobs been created by this?
Yes. Yes.
Edgar Kaiser.
Edgar Kaiser becomes the head salesman for a company he just sold, and he gets $1 million a month for it. I want everybody to understand that Bill Bennett has created one new job, and it's for Edgar.
He also makes $5.6 million if he realizes the profits on his own stock, according to the information available.
Look, Edgar Kaiser is only doing what a sharp businessman would do, make a buck. But he's making other people, the ordinary taxpayers of this province and the small investors of this province who took Bill Bennett's word about this company, look very, very bad about their investment.
Edgar Kaiser is off to Japan again. Halliwell is just back from Japan. When is the moment of truth? And I mean, if Bennett doesn't act, which obviously he will not do, but what is the moment of truth?
October 7th. Now, it is unbelievable to see what's going on now. We have the spectacle of Kaiser flying back and forth to Japan. We have Halliwell, who's just come back from Japan. Are they telling us that they never discussed this deal with the Japanese and that they hoped and crossed their fingers that Mitsubishi would not tender on its shares?
I believe it says so in the prospectus that the Kaiser people thought the Japanese would not tender.
That is correct.
Have you got that there?
Kaiser said that he spoke to Mitsubishi, and he got the impression that they might hang on to their shares. And can you imagine making a multi-million deal based on the impression that they might hang on to their shares?
And if they don't, BRIC has to raise the other $400 million.
$400 million out of Canadian banks on money that is competitive for mortgages for homes, out of Canadian banks to pay off the Japanese. And don't blame the Japanese on this deal. This one is not their fault.
You say it's the naivety of BRIC directors and the lack of guidance from Bennett?
I am trying to be as charitable as I can when I use the same word Mr. Halliwell uses, naive. As for Mr. Bennett, he has run away from his responsibility. That is not naivety. That is fear.
We have 1,000 other things to talk about, but let's go to the phones on BRIC and see if people want to demolish Mr. Barrett or accept some of his interpretations after the break. I must put it to you that, is this the biggest single issue on your mind at the moment?
No, it's not the only big issue in my mind at the moment, but it certainly is drawing a lot of my attention. I must admit that it concerns me a great deal. I'm very worried about it. Very worried about it.
Funny how a thing like this comes up and one drops one's interest in the Constitution forthwith.
Jack, the Constitution debate is a great thing for lawyers and for observers, but in terms of bread and butter issues, this is pretty bad.
Okay, dokie. We'll take a call first from... Go ahead, please. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, that's you. Speak up, please.
Yes, Mr. Barrett, I'd like to know how the general business community of Vancouver feels about these last shenanigans.
Well, I would think that some of them feel uncomfortable. I admire and respect Mr. Hepburn for his statements of Odlum Reed. You know, it's a pretty forthright statement.
But I can put it to you another way, that if you total up the gross assets of Kaiser, $1 billion, or $620-odd million for that part, only equals the potential value of the coal resources of B.C., well, of Kaiser Coal.
The purpose of any company with investors in it is to make money for their shareholders. If the Japanese sell, what we have is a situation where the selling price is a little bit greater than the potential revenue producing or profit producing part of what they've bought. So they're in a loss position.
There's a figure in there for the maximum that Kaiser could make on their own. What is it?
$62 million.
Well, if B.R.I.C shareholders were to make $62 million next year, I better declare my interest. I've got 200 shares of B.R.I.C, but I'm not a director on the board.
Yeah, I didn't take even the 5 free shares.
On the $62 million, 12 would come off the top for Kaiser.
That's right.
And that would leave $50 million of that particular asset to service the debt.
That's great. And if
you told me that the assets that you put into government ownership, which were thrown into B.R.I.C, would carry more of the debt.
We'd carry more of the debt because the assets that we purchased for $40 million are now worth close to, as I say, $375 million. They are the moneymaker assets of the corporation.
I mustn't get involved. I want short, sharp opinions, please, carefully phrased on this program. From Prince George, go ahead.
Yes, I was just going to ask Mr. Barrett a question.
Yes.
What's going to happen when, or what should happen to those board of directors that if it's found out that they were playing around?
Well, we don't know.
No. We can't speculate on that. Mr. Getz has been instructed to look into that aspect.
But that's basically on an allegation of insider trading which may have taken place in the Ontario stock market.
That is correct. But
starting with the Ontario Securities Commission.
But let no one in this province believe that Getz's direction can look into the nature of the deal itself. He cannot. He just must prove or disprove that there was insider trading advantage.
Oh, he's not looking at the deal.
No.
He's looking at allegations of improper profiting.
That is all he can look at.
Somewhere in North America.
He cannot look at the deal. He has no mandate. That's why I've called for a public inquiry.
Did you get any response from Mr. Bennett on that?
No.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning. My husband and I invested in B.R.I.C shares, which we really couldn't afford, and we did it on Mr. Bennett's advice. And we are just so terribly upset. We'd like to have a shareholders meeting and be able to vote no on this purchase. And I think everyone should phone Social Credit Party headquarters and request it.
How many shares do you have?
Well, 100 each, and you know, it's quite a bit to put out when you don't have a lot of money. And we really believed it would be used for developing B.C. and not used for what is, you know, I don't feel that this is right. I'm just so upset I don't know what to do about it.
Thank you, ma'am.
This lady is very typical. A lot of ordinary people saw Bill Bennett as the Premier of the province on television, urging them to buy shares. They mailed out the BC government news extolling the virtues.
Wasn't Mr. Bennett's picture at one time on the application for common shares of B.R.I.C?
Yes, it was, but then they pulled off his picture, but they left his quote on the application for shares. Now, do you know of any other company that's selling shares in the marketplace that has a statement from the Premier of the province on the application for shares?
I urge you, your family and friends, to take advantage of this unique offer and to participate directly in the future growth. Oh, it doesn't say Edgar Kaiser, it says British Columbia.
Look, these people, this lady who called, went out and borrowed $1,200 with her husband, $600 each if they bought 100 shares each. $1,200, and they probably borrowed it at a time when the interest rates were 11.5%.
Might have paid cash. They haven't lost any money yet.
No, if they paid cash, what they've lost is the potential interest off their $1,200.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just before I make my point, to be fair, before I knock the heck out of B.R.I.C, I just point out that all those people could have sold their shares at $9 and made a 50% profit on their money in under a year.
That is correct. And a lot of very wise people, as it appears now, did that. But remember, Bill Bennett said, hang on to those shares. They're not going to make a dividend payment right away. He
I'd
advised
throw
people.
that in because I agree with you on the most. The only one good side of this Kaiser deal I see is that at least we're repatriating control of one company. But the price is indeed outrageous, especially when it's made with without any outside investment advice. And I think it was probably done just because they were scared Brascan or Alberta Energy or somebody might be coming along.
Mr. Halliwell, they admitted or said to me when I asked him, was he afraid of a takeover bid for Kaiser? Was it from the Alberta Energy Corporation? He said there were whispers of that.
Well, let us deal with the very good argument that this caller has raised, the patriation. All right. If it is patriation on the basis of a Canadian corporation, Brascan or Alberta, that is a Canadian corporation. It is not another foreign corporation. Secondly, the old argument used by old socialists that we have to own all of these resources in the public domain to ensure that we have control here is no longer viable. We can control international corporations by legislation and by royalties. And even though Kaiser is now a Canadian and is essentially an American company, there is no point in pouring in vast sums of investment money into a viable operation. Those risks should go into new ventures.
In other words, you're saying that even if it had been a good deal at $28,
That's right.
or $31.
To deal with the philosophical argument of this caller, the options in terms of directing that new money was to create new jobs and spin off investment in British Columbia.
Which hasn't happened.
It has not happened.
Instead, it may drain the money market here.
Well, the very purchases we made and can sell Plateau Mills and Kootenay Forest products may be the saving grace to save Kaiser Steel in the United States, and how ironic that would be.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello, Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
You already said that with our 5 shares we can't have any votes or anything. I was wondering, is there any way we can get together, like say, with 20 other people with
No.
shares?
No, you have to own in one name 100 shares before you can vote.
Registered.
Oh, so there's no way that we can't do anything with our 5 shares?
No, no.
The only guy who can protect you, and I think I'm saying this quite directly and bluntly,
It's Bill Bennett.
is Bill Bennett. He's the only guy who's got enough clout. Oh, is there anything statute-wise in that Kaiser Resources
Yes.
letter which perhaps indicates that there could be government intervention?
Yes, there is an awareness of that by the BRIC directors. They put as a caveat, that is a condition of this deal going through, that the government or some agency does not interfere. They knew themselves.
Any valid interference by a government or court of competent jurisdiction could
Invalidates this deal.
invalidate this
That is
deal.
correct. That
So
is
the money is not at risk in a long legal battle.
No, what they've said is the BRIC Board of Directors is recognizing that Bill Bennett and the government of BC is the biggest single shareholder.
Is there any doubt in your mind that he has the power, as the Premier of the province, to act under order and council?
It is his child, and he has the right to spank it.
But can he do it legally?
Yes, yes,
Can he phone up Halliwell and say, such as the public
He can
furor,
order
that Barrett that I want this deal cancelled?
He doesn't need to phone up Halliwell in order to cancel a deal. He can order a shareholders meeting, and he, along with other shareholders, can stand up and tell the directors in public, it's a lousy deal, cancel it before October the 7th, and we as shareholders are telling you so.
There must be something good about the deal.
For Edgar Kaiser, yes.
Something good for British Columbia about the deal, surely.
I don't know what's good for British Columbia in this deal.
Have I taken this call or not? I forget. Go ahead. I'll take you briefly before the break. Go ahead, please.
Oh, you already took my call.
Thank you very much. After the break. It's okay. We, BRIC shareholders, we're going to buy by November the 7th, if the Japanese concur. They can concur but still sell out their $400 million.
That is
can't
correct.
they?
Yes, that's correct.
We're going to buy for $55 a share
Yeah,
the assets of Kaiser.
that's correct.
Less certain items.
2 specifically named categories of items. One is Kaiser Oil U.S. Limited, and the others for $23 million that he gets to buy back one day before the deal is
He
consummated.
gives us $23 million on
is
an
right.
installment plan for that.
That's right, at 11%. He pays $4 million, and the rest is financed at 11% by the company.
That's to buy back from BRIC his oil company in California,
that is
or in the States.
In the States. It has leases, as I understand it, in 15 American states with one functioning oil well. That company is being purchased back by Edgar Kaiser at the book value of his investment, not at its assessed value in selling it to BRIC. For all we know, it may be worth $100 million in the package to BRIC, but he gets to buy it back at what he paid for it.
It does say book value at his investment.
At the company's investment.
And what's the other $15 million he has to pay?
The other $15 million is to buy back property in New York, Mexico, and elsewhere. One jet craft that we don't even know the name of, or the serial, or the number. An option on another jet craft, which is probably worth a substantial amount of money, because what happens when you buy a jet aircraft is you buy a fleet of 3. You buy one, another one, and then an option on a third somewhere down the production line. And that's a fixed price at the date you buy it. You may not get delivery 2 or 3 years down the road, and the plane may be worth 35 or 40%.
So we're buying unstated property in Mexico,
New York, the jet plane, furnishings.
parking place for the leasehold
Yes.
improvements, furnishings,
Everything is all listed
and a
in here.
parking space for the jet plane at Vancouver Airport.
That is correct. We don't know.
Well, Kaiser's got to fly back and forward to Japan as our agent, collecting $1 million a month for his organization.
He can go on Canadian Pacific Airlines a lot cheaper.
Difficult to follow.
It's not difficult to follow, Jack. This is a straight sellout. If you sit down with any stockbroker quietly and off the record in the Vancouver stock market or anyone else and ask them to analyze this deal, they'll tell you exactly what I'm telling you. This is a terrible deal.
But most stock analysts are kicking themselves in the bottom for not exercising at 45 cents a share options on the way up from $31 to $55 of Kaiser's stock.
There is not a stock salesman out there who is working hard for his customers that would not have loved to have had the information to pick up the phone and advise their customers pick up options while you can.
Mind you, to be fair to the Kaiser executives and to Kaiser had already sold one of his big properties in the States.
Ashland.
He was planning to sell. They all knew that they were planning to sell their interests in British Columbia if they could find the right buyer.
I'm not sure that everybody knew that. I wasn't aware.
Well, some of the executives got interest-free loans so they could.
That's something that Getz is looking into, but I'm not aware of any public statement by Kaiser saying, I want to sell in BC.
No, but there's been rumors around for a long while about Kaiser.
That's what Alec MacDonald has pointed out to Bullock. A lot of rumors, but never a public statement saying we want to flog it off to get out of BC.
Oh, stories in the business page from BRIC.
There was speculation, BRIC,
were
yes.
going to buy Kaiser.
Ken Bell of the Vancouver province wrote an article this spring speculating on that. But
then the $44 offer came out.
That
and
the
wasn't picked up.
That's right. It wasn't picked up.
Intelligent people might have said, hey, they're going to go for the whole bag of tricks.
Intelligent people looking at the cancellation at 44 would have said they're not going for it, and intelligent people looking at the cancellation of 44 and then seeing 60 days later that it's up to 55 would flip right out and say, what's going on?
Rosalind, BC, go ahead, please.
Good morning. First, I'd like to say the sooner we can get that board of directors, give them some direction and say, let's forget this, even though we may look a little silly.
Right.
For the sake of our BRIC shares, let's look silly and do the right thing.
Hear, hear.
And a good alternative, I think, is why are we not considering getting control of BC.Tel in British Columbia? That is a public utility.
Okay, separate question, short answer from Mr. Barrett.
We considered the options we had in government. We made a decision as an NDP government, no, we would not bring it under public ownership, but under public control. We should not pony up the vast millions of dollars that BC.Tel is faced with renewing in that corporation. But we should have control from Ottawa over the telephone company.
That's part of the constitutional kick.
Yes, and Bennett's taken the same position we laid out when we were in government.
From Smithers, BC, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Barrett, could you tell me, how do you know if the Japanese are going to sell their shares?
We don't know.
You don't know?
And isn't it incredible that at this stage of the deal, that we don't know what the Japanese are going to do, that Edgar Kaiser said in here that he spoke to them, and they felt that the Japanese might not do anything, but they don't know for sure. At this late date, we don't know what the Japanese are going to do.
I'm not giving you a political advantage, I don't think. We're dealing with facts straight up. Are you telling me now that when the BRIC directors, those who did not have a conflict of interest, voted to make the offer at $55, that they did not know if they were going to have to face an extra $400 million expenditure to buy out the Japanese?
On page 2 of the Kaiser Resources note to the shareholders of Kaiser Resources, just take a minute to read it, Japanese shareholders. The BRIC proposal has been discussed with Mitsubishi Corporation and 9 other Japanese corporations who are major customers of the company's coal. These corporations hold together an aggregate of 7,236,000 shares, 39.9%. While none of these corporations has yet stated its intentions with respect to the offer, the board believes that in the light of their position as major customers accounting for 74% of the company's total sales, the Japanese shareholders may have objectives that are different from the shareholders who are also not customers. BRIC has indicated that it welcomes the continuation of the Japanese corporations as shareholders. Who do they indicate that to? And the last line, consequently, the directors of the company make no recommendations to the Japanese shareholders with respect to this offer.
Who signed that letter?
Edgar Kaiser.
So therefore, when they said, yeah, we'll go for the $55 bid, which was going to cost them the basic bid without the Japanese, how much
BRIC
was that?
said that we're going to go and accept this letter of agreement and offer $55 a share, they did not know whether or not the Japanese would take that offer and tender their shares, and they don't know to this day.
An extra $400 million they may have to raise on the market at current rates.
Not may, will have to raise.
If the Japanese say...
If the Japanese say we're selling our shares, they'll have to cough up with $400 million.
As I recall, BRIC, however, it does have $1 billion credit total.
Well, sure, anybody can have $1 billion credit on assets, but if your assets are dissipated and use your credit, you're running on a pretty thin edge.
Webster and Dave Barrett on BRIC after the break. Well, Mr. Barrett, I'll have to have Mr. Bennett back again, won't I?
Well, I would think that he should publicly face a press conference.
Well, I should say that any director of BRIC, any old director of BRICs, and Mr. Helliwell, if he wants to come back on the program again, they're more than welcome at very short notice because of this matter of great public import. And of course, Mr. Bennett.
I think it would be worthwhile if the board of directors came on as a small group and just said, well, Mr. Barrett's interpretation is wrong, or Mr. Hepburn of Odlum Reed is wrong, or you're reading this paragraph wrong, or we have an appraisal done privately, not Kaiser's. That would be welcome news to the shareholders.
Sure would be. Go ahead, please.
Hello. I own 190 shares. Now, is it possible for me, through the court, to seek an injunction restraining the directors for not protecting our interests?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Illegally, people can do things like this. I don't know what it would cost.
Oh, you can always seek an injunction, I'm quite sure of that, but it would cost you a lot of money.
I'm not sure whether or not he could seek an injunction. I'm not a lawyer. You'd have to talk to a lawyer. I don't even know whether or not this is class action is applicable in this case. But it's worthwhile pursuing with a lawyer.
Are you unhappy about the deal, sir?
Certainly. I paid cash for my shares, and I could have made a lot more money by just leaving the damn things invested as they were.
On term deposits?
Like, yes, you buy these shares, and they aren't paying any dividends from BRIC, and it doesn't look as though there's ever going to be anything out of the thing.
Well, we're not talking about the average speculator in the stock market. These people were appealed to by the Premier of this province to do their duty and invest in B.C.
I think that's a basic difference. Yeah. No one cries tears for people who get burned in the stock market.
No, I never have. Never have. But what happened here is we got a Premier of the province who put his name on the application urging people to buy them, people who have never been near the marketplace, saying that he wanted to teach them how the free enterprise system works in the marketplace, people who believed that it was, no, I'm serious.
He's taught them.
He's taught them all right. Kaiser's taught them. But the point is that a lot of people who would normally not risk money in the marketplace, most Canadians are cautious, careful people. Mm-hmm. they're the ones that bought 100 shares or 200 shares when the money could have been used far more profitably in another area.
I bought 200 shares and didn't sell them at $9.
Well, okay.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Barrett.
Yes, sir.
I'm a House Street trader, or probably professional.
Right.
I find this deal almost unbelievable. And I go along with Tony Hepburn.
Yeah.
When he says at the $44 offer, control could have been acquired then.
That's correct, sir.
I don't think there's any question on the street that it could not have been acquired then.
That's correct.
Certainly 25%, which is effective control. Any sensible person would think that absolute control could have been acquired at that time.
Well, surely 25% plus what you could buy on the market would have given you total control in any case as by far the larger shareholder.
There is no way that the Japanese would have exercised their 40% as control over BRICS. They would have played a passive role. The Japanese role in this has not been primarily as an investment, but a secure base for those coal contracts. That has always been the Japanese position, a passive one. What this gentleman is saying is something I agree in completely. If BRIC had shown the aggressiveness at $44, taken up the option to pick up 25%, they would have been the controller. The Japanese would not have wanted it. There would have been no other group of shareholders who would have demanded control. This fellow is calling, says he's a traitor. I'll bet you he's never in his life voted NDP. And here we have an anomalous situation of both of us agreeing with what Mr. Hepburn of Odlum Reed has said.
Well, sir, did you buy any stock on the way up to $53?
I traded quite well. I bought it when it came out, and I sold it near the top. But
sure, he knew that.
I'd like to comment to Mr. Barrett about many of my friends on the market who were screaming about the red horde at the gate.
Yeah.
They're almost universally of the opinion that this is unbelievable.
Well, let me ask you this. When we bought Cancel, you remember we paid $1 and we picked up the mortgage for $69 million. Is it not true that market analysts, the most conservative market analysts, viewed that purchase as one of the best ever made by anybody, government or non-government?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when we purchased...
Who was the big multinational that wanted out?
It was Celanese Corporation of America. Now, when we bought that asset, there was absolutely no political interference, and that's what the marketplace was satisfied with the NDP. We went out and hired Mr. Gross. We did not ask whether he was a socialist, capitalist, or anything else. His instruction on behalf of us was to make us money in fair competition with the Big Five. We never interfered. He made us money.
Fair enough. Thank you. Bye. Next one. From Victoria, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Barrett.
Yes, sir.
I heard you talking about Columbia Cellulose.
Yes, sir.
Now, you said that it was a very good buy.
Excellent buy.
Province.
Yes, sir.
Now, what sort of financial shape were they in before you bought this?
They had losing years of $80 million in losses for the year before we bought it. We happen to have a major ingredient in business known as luck. Help
so
us.
therefore, yes,
We were very lucky. However, sir...
Losing proposition. I agree with you.
However, sir, no one should ever knock luck. We had a battery of economists, of lawyers, and accountants do 3 months' work confidentially for us before we made that purchase. We did not take Cancel's word for what they were selling us. Cancel never gave us a letter of agreement like this. We checked out every single dot on every single I and every cross on every T before we made that deal. We are not that foolish. And we were lucky, sir. I will be the first to admit it. I've said it before. Nothing like a little bit of luck.
Let me ask this man to give me his honest opinion from your side of the brick deal, the Kaiser brick deal.
Yes.
What is your opinion?
My opinion of the Kaiser brick deal is that I feel that it is not that bad of a move. B.C.R.I.C. should be considered really as not a short-term investment, but as a medium to long-term investment. Therefore, I am speaking of a period
Yes.
of 5 years to 20 years.
Absolutely correct. Then why invest that money in something that's already functioning, paying taxes and providing jobs? Why not invest that money as its original purpose in new ventures with long-term payout and provide new jobs and new investment in British Columbia?
Now, Mr. Barrett, one thing that you say about, or the NDP complain about is, foreign ownership in our natural resources and whatnot.
Mr. Kaiser is a Canadian citizen.
Resources.
You're not complaining about the fact that...
I've never complained about that. As a matter of fact, sir, I am on record in disagreement with my national party. I have disagreed with my national party. It is not essential in terms of ownership. What is essential?
Sir?
Wait, let me finish. It is essential in terms of control of the resources.
Right,
That's
sir.
what's essential.
I must take my break.
Okay.
I left you on for a while because it seemed that you might be pro the deal, which would certainly be a change from the other call. Back after the break. Yes, I wonder how many people, Mr. Barrett, will tell you after this program or your other public announcements that you're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Jack
Because
Webster.
after all, this kind of behavior which you object to in terms of the options and the apparent good deal for Kaiser and his sales company and the properties, and perhaps the Japanese will want to take the profits, is big business, is it not? Is it not normal
Jack
conduct
Webster,
in big business?
Jack Webster, I have no objection to people seeing the ruthlessness of the barracudas and the sharks in the big business world. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not naive enough, to not understand what's going on. That's why I went into politics, to try and protect little people. This is a separate deal. BRIC was created by an act of the BC legislature. BRIC was touted by the Premier of the province of British Columbia.
Exempted
BRIC
from...
was financed in the sales of those shares from tax money, $40 million. All of this is a government operation. Now, along comes a government operation that's getting skinned. And it is my duty, Jack, to say loud and clear, anybody out there that wants to get skinned, go in the marketplace. But let us not get skinned on a deal that was touted by the government of British Columbia under Bill Bennett. It's clear.
Go ahead, please.
It's clear.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Question, Mr. Barrett. Is it possible through your organization to develop a method whereby the small shareholders, I'm talking about us 100 share types, could gain access to a petition to the BRIC directors?
I think it's possible. I don't think we've got enough time. Here we are,
It seems to me the NDP has some pretty good organization people there.
We've got organization skills, but it wouldn't be enough time, in my opinion, to hit all of the shareholders. Perhaps if the shareholders themselves wanted to call a mass public meeting, that would be something else. But that would have no official clout.
Have you asked
how about organizing that? It wouldn't have any clout anyway.
No, it wouldn't have any clout. But, well, if shareholders are interested and enough of them, we were getting all kinds of calls, if enough of them want the NDP to sponsor such a meeting or us to rent the hall, I would certainly turn it over to the party executive to consider.
Well, it's only a suggestion, and I certainly would be behind it.
Well, are you an NDPer?
I never have voted that way in my life until the next election.
Well, you know, I worry about these calls. I wonder if it's just somebody setting me up.
Look, Jack, I don't know whether or not, but I know in my office in Victoria that we are getting flooded with calls of people who are saying,
well,
look,
why don't you take, I mean, your leadership this morning politically has certainly been blunt. You want Bennett to act, right?
Yeah.
You want an order in council to stop the deal.
Right.
What else did you say?
I want a public inquiry.
A public inquiry
in the whole deal.
You want the BRIC directors to look at the deal again.
Yes. Now, if it would serve any useful purpose of the NDP to call a public meeting of shareholders, that's something they should consider. But I don't, I can talk it over with our executive.
No, but you've got lawyers coming out of your ears.
Yes, we have lawyers.
Why can't you tell people if it's possible, perhaps for one of your lawyers to ask for some kind of enjoiner from the courts.
We have one of our lawyers looking at the what options are open in terms of court action. We deliberately bought some shares. Dave Stupich bought 1,000 shares, and Stu Leggett bought I don't know how many shares. But we deliberately did so we could monitor it. Now they, as shareholders, their role as individuals is being examined by the lawyers to see if we can come up with something. I don't know if we can.
Thank you. Go ahead, please. Where are you?
Is it me?
It's you, ma'am. Speak up.
We own 60% of the shares in the province, though, right?
No, we own 5% of the shares of BRIC.
No, but as a majority, we own 60% of
Oh, in BC residents, you mean?
Pardon me?
BC residents, you mean?
Yes?
Yes, they own...
60% are held outside of the Japanese interest. The people
No, he's talking about BRIC.
Yeah.
The vast majority of registered shareholders of BRIC are in British Columbia, 130,000.
That's correct, yes, that is correct.
We have total control over these companies, right?
That is correct if you call an emergency shareholders meeting.
Well, is it to that point?
Well, I believe that you won't have enough time, and there's not one single individual big enough shareholder to start rallying the rest of the shareholders.
It wasn't meant to be individual share, or, one company or whatever. Bill Bennett said that everybody was to have a part of these companies, right? And everybody went and got, 5 free shares, and maybe some people bought up more, right?
Yeah.
But it's us that own it. Like when you were...
No, you do not. 5 free shareholders do not own the company. You have a share in the company, but...
As British Columbians we do, right?
No. It was everybody owned it when we were in power.
Right.
And you could have voted for the government of the day or not the government of the day. What Bill Bennett did was give you 5 free shares and buy you out for that. You don't even have a right to vote. If you bought 100 shares, you have a right to vote on the company. You don't own it because you got 5 free shares.
As a majority,
She's saying, what she's trying to say to you, Mr. Barrett, is that the majority of registered sharedholders in British Columbia are in BC.
That is
and
correct.
on the face of it, if they were like-minded...
I don't even know why I have a share then. I don't even know what was the use of sending it out to me.
What do you have? Do you have the 5 free shares?
Well, I've got, 25 shares.
Yeah, well, you don't have a vote.
Pardon me?
You don't have a vote. You have to own 100 shares to have a vote. You gave up your right to vote when you accepted the 5 free shares.
If I may say so, if she got a social credit dividend of 25 shares at face value $6 today.
Well, see, it must have 5 people in her house, and they got 5 shares each. She has no vote.
Thank you. The Kamloops.
Yes.
Can't hear you.
I would like to speak to Dave Barrett, please.
He's here. Do go straight ahead.
Oh, is this Mr. Webster I'm speaking to?
Yes. Would you hold on a second, sir? Turn down your television set, which is giving you instant paranoia or something, and I'll speak to you in a moment. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster, I feel you're flogging something, a wheel that's gone around and around now. Can we change the subject, please?
Oh, who am I to refuse you?
Okay.
Mr. Barrett, the lower
First of all...
still toying with the idea of going into LRT, etc., and so on and so forth.
Oh.
And the social credits have created this boondoggle setup where bureaucracy is taken over.
Oh, sir, I'm afraid that if Mr. Barrett's mind can adjust, mine can't. I made a commitment to myself to do it on BRIC, and on BRIC I'm doing it. What do you think of the BRIC deal? Am I wasting my time?
No, you're not wasting your time, but I totally agree with Mr. Barrett that it's an awful mess. And
Thank you, sir. Can't switch into LRT. There are 20 other subjects that we haven't touched.
We haven't even touched the Constitution.
Thank goodness.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Barrett,
Yes, sir.
must we have our mothers or our governments hold our hands from the time that we're out of our cradle and into our graves?
Absolutely not, sir. That is why in the private marketplace the government should keep its damn nose out of it. In this instance, the government used your tax money to flog shares and tell you to buy shares. The government coddled you into the marketplace. The government kissed you on the forehead and said, "Go forth, my son, and guess how things are going to work in the marketplace." And after coddling you that far, dumped you into you-know-what. And I am very angry, sir, about the government coddling you right up to the counter to buy these shares and then dropping you when it turns sour. If you want to be a damn fool and hit the marketplace, you're free to do it. But Bill Bennett stuck his nose in the way, coddled you up there, and then left you so he hit the mountaintop.
Shit bastard.
What did he say?
Well, it doesn't matter. It's okay.
It doesn't really matter.
No.
I mean, actually, some of these words...
He's very angry at me.
Some of these words are used now are positive. They use that word which I may or may not have killed is used as a term of endearment in Australia.
Okay.
Must be a couple of Sheilas or Cobbers around here.
Okay.
The blanks. After the break. I hope I'm not smiling.
Well,
Nothing to smile about this morning. We just had a little joke off air. Number 8. Your name again is Barrett? David Barrett, former Premier?
That's correct.
Sitting quietly in the wings, confident that you will surge into power in the wave of brick, etc.,
I'm
etc.,
not
etc.
confident about that at all, Jack.
You are going to run in the next election.
Oh, I certainly am. I made that commitment. No question about it.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like there's only about 24 people out of about 2 million that are happy with this deal. So I wonder where the conservatives and liberals are these days. What are they saying about this? And further to that, maybe we can organize a 2 or 3 week demonstration in front of the legislature. What do you think of that?
I don't think that demonstrations in front of the legislature would serve any useful purpose. I think it might be worthwhile to telegraph the Premier's office and ask him to use those shares, which you're part owners in, because it's not his purchase. Those shares are held in the name of all of the people of BC, and he is the person who could speak for those shares, the biggest single shareholder, to call a meeting and deal with this.
I'd really forgotten that. The government actually holds 3 point, or just under 5%.
Just under 5% on our behalf. And they are the single biggest shareholder. And it's not Bill Bennett or the cabinet or anyone else that bought these shares personally. These shares belong to all of us and can be voted at an annual meeting by the Premier.
Were they paid out of the Treasury?
Yes, that is correct.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, hello. I've made up my mind that I'm going to stick with brick.
Good.
And I'll just bet you that Mr. Barrett, inside of a year or 2 or less, he'll wish he'd have bought a few hundred of them.
Madam, I refused to take my 5 free shares as a matter of principle. Those companies and those assets that were vilified by social credit all were worth a great deal of money and had the potential of allowing us to grow in our own province. I regret that this deal has come up. I hope, madam, that I am wrong. I hoped a year ago that I was wrong, and I said so on Webster's program a year ago.
I think you are. Thank you.
I hope I am.
She's going to stick with brick. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to know your views on the planned exploitation in the north by BC Hydro.
Well, sir, we're not on that topic this morning. We're coming close to the end. Do forgive me. We're going to continue with brick until the end of the program. It's nearly finished now anyway. Go ahead, please.
Am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to ask, the 60% of the shareholders in BC, those are people who are small people who've got the $5 shares?
No, madam. No. Those people who got 5 free shares do not have a vote. You had to buy a vote. You had to buy 100 shares to have a vote.
Yes, please, sir. I wanted to say that there is a way. There are many people who have 20 people in their family who each have 5 shares.
No.
Now, if 20 people get together and 19 of them sell their shares and the other one buys 19 shares, then you can have people...
That's correct.
No, that is not correct. That is not correct. Those shares do not have voting rights, even accumulated. You have to buy shares, not the free shares.
Oh.
Many people have given free shares to the New Democratic Party. Many members of the NDP mailed in their 5 free shares.
You mean if I've got myself, my wife, and 18 children, and we get 5 each, I can't consolidate them in 100?
I do not believe you can.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I'm just wondering if Mr. Barrett would answer the question about acquisition and concerning Dunhill. and the price we paid, was that evaluated like he wanted Brick evaluated?
Yes, it certainly was evaluated, and we got a good deal and was sold off at a good profit, just the same way Panko, which we bought for $3 million, and the Socred sold for $11 million, 2 years after we bought it.
What was
Dunhill was the housing corporation.
Oh, yeah.
We made money on that, too.
Again, you were lucky.
Jack, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of luck, but I want to tell you, in every case, we've had full appraisals before we bought anything, which helps your luck.
How do you feel about Brick, Caller?
I think in the long run it'll be a good long-term investment. But I think Mr. Barrett speaks in certain ways in saying he doesn't interfere with government. Well, in housing, some of the land they bought in areas are just as bad as Brick did.
Look, I am not saying that we didn't interfere. I said we took the responsibility directly for what we bought. And Dunhill, Panko Poultry, Cancel, and everything else we bought. We took the responsibility up front. We never ran
And you'll
from
agree that perhaps everything wasn't just 100% right.
We did the right procedure in terms of having appraisals. We were very lucky, and we made money.
Okay, and you're with Brick. You're going to stick with Brick, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Caller. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think that David Halliwell done Bennett, the public, and...
Carry on, sir.
I think he done us all a very great disservice. I think that Brick's a great company. It's ours. I just believe that he was made an absolute ass off, unfortunately, and he should resign.
Well, you're not the first person to have expressed that view, sir. The Vancouver Sun did, as I recall, not shortly after the Kaiser deal was announced. And thank you for your call, sir. How am I for time? Is that poor person still in Kamloops?
Yes.
You have time for one word. Are you sticking with Brick, or do you think it's a bad deal? From Kamloops.
The people of B.C. owned the shares before this crooked social credit.
No. There we go again. I shouldn't. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'll have a final word with Mr. Barrett after the break. Mr. Barrett, will you repeat your call for order and council action by the government to stop the Kaiser deal?
That is the only way, Jack. I ask Bill Bennett and the social credit government to do the responsible thing, order in council, cancel this deal.
Tomorrow, among others, Pierre Burton, Stan Persky, story about Lindane, story about the Moonies, which I must do. I've been trying to get on the air all week, but I just can't get it on, about Procter & Gamble. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. precisely.